Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Sounds nice.
I call to order the October 19th, 2021 Safety Committee meeting. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We can let the record show that all members of the committee are present. Councilman Avens, Councilman Jacobs, and myself, Chairwoman Swain. Also present is Mayor Corcoran, Councilman Boos, Councilman Molesky, and Hijabi Gullam, the assistant clerk. Before you have the safety committee meeting minutes of August 24th, 2021. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, those are approved. All right, so we're here to discuss the following: an ordinance amending certain sections of the North Ridgeville Codified Ordinance, Chapter 476, snowmobiles, off-highway motorcycles, and all-purpose vehicles. And then a ordinance amending North Ridgeville Codified Ordinance, Chapter 634, noise control to sound control. If Mr. Councilman Molesky would like to come up and give us an overview.
Thank you. So we met last time in August, and the committee recommended that we do some changes, and we actually added to change it to sound control, from noise control to sound control. Like we said before, that noise was more of a nuisance and left a very arbitrary way to judge a level of issue that might be going on. So we changed it to sound, which makes it a quantifiable measurement, which then actually turns it into a certain number of decibels, which was added to the ordinance. And then also how we would calculate that specific decibel level. Also added to it was we reduced it down from 5 to 3 acres, which was discussed with the committee as well. We also added the time change, which I know written in the ordinance it's kind of backwards. It does say dawn to dusk. We probably will change that to dusk to 9 a.m., which falls in line with the normal time of our last ordinance that we had. Just changes the end time, which is dusk, based on daylight savings time, because we know that 7 o'clock around here is different, whether it's the middle of July or whether it's the middle of December. But as far as the rating goes, it's been switched to the 94 to 96 decibel level at a 50% RPM, 20 inches from the source, using the device that the police already have. At a 50% RPM rated, which is actually higher. The old one had it at 83. This actually increases it up to a 94, which puts it at a national level. And two things I do want to reiterate: that it is for recreational vehicles. This does not prohibit someone plowing at 5 a.m. I'm that person too. When I have snow, I'm out of my house by 5:45 every morning. I have to plow. That's not stopping that. And it's like when the chief was here, he described it as a ordinance that would have to be called on and complained about. It's not something that he or his officers would be looking for. It is a complaint-driven ordinance, and just to come out and to test it at that rate to see if it falls within what was considered by the American Motorcycle Association the national standards of a 94 to 96 decibel at a 50% RPM. I believe that was everything that was changed based on the committee's recommendations and discussions that were had.
Thank you. Does anyone in the committee have any questions that they would like to ask or offer any comments?
So just as a point of clarification, then the time frame on the ordinance now reads between dawn and dusk, that you cannot operate these vehicles between dawn and dusk, which obviously is a mistake because that's
Correct.
the daytime. So the suggestion is to change that to say between dusk and 9 a.m.
Correct.
You cannot operate them between dusk and 9 a.m.
Correct, and that falls within also the previous ordinances that went on the books, let's say 9 a.m. Monday through Friday, I believe. That changes on Saturday and Sunday, but this, for these purposes, this ordinance was the 9 a.m. to dusk.
So the current ordinance reads 7 a.m. during the weekday, and then Saturdays, the hours of 9 a.m. and Sunday for the hour of 10. So we're just going to change all of it to 9 a.m. Monday to Monday.
Yes, for this particular, yes.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Mayor, any comments or questions from the administration?
Not at this time.
Are there any council members in the audience? All right, well, we will now open it up for the lobby session. If you would like to speak on this, you can come up to the podium, say your name and address for the record.
Thank you. I don't understand why this ordinance is being changed.
Can you state your name and address?
I'm sorry, my name is Paula Cope. I'm at 6795 Stony Ridge Road. And I think the way the legislation is currently worded seems to be sufficient. And from what I read in the past minutes, it appears that a lot of the complaints are stemming from the one rule that requires the 200 feet distance between the riders and a residence. And I would like to respectfully request that that 200 foot rule remain. The decibel level that is allowed, anything over 85 is the unhealthy level. So anything protruding into the living space of a residence is very unhealthy. And it's not just unhealthy for the humans, it's also unhealthy for companion animals. I'm glad that there's an amendment to make it from 9 a.m. because dusk, being able to ride it from dawn to dusk is a little bit extreme, as with my experience, I have suffered up to 7 hours of nonstop riding of these recreational vehicles within 125 feet of my house. And even though my complaints to neighbors go unheard, I've seen that once that 200 foot rule was enforced by the police, that it made a whole big difference. You know, it's tolerable. Now, I know the police might think it's a little difficult to measure that, but they all have access to computers in their cruisers. And when you go to the county auditor's website and bring up the tax maps, bring up a 2020 aerial view, there's a measuring tool, and you can actually measure from a residence across the properties, the 200 feet. That's what I did. I was looking at the Noise Control Act of 1972, and a lot of the decibels for the noises across highways is at a lower level than what's being going to be amended in the noise ordinance. And like I said, those prolonged sounds over 85 has a lot of ill effects on people, because I know that it did for me. There are respectful riders, and I think some of those that are unconsiderate of their neighbors are the ones that are making it bad for the rest of the riders that do follow the laws, do follow the 200 foot rule. and don't have the long time of, 2, 6, 7 hours of riding. So I just respectfully requesting that the 200-foot will be placed back.
Yes. The 200-foot rule is staying. Actually, it was discussed whether or not that was actually going to increase. But it was determined when we were meeting that we're going to stay with the 200-foot. And the decibel level that it's at, that's at a 50% RPM. So
You know what, that's so old in my head.
it's revving up as about halfway through. So
Okay.
it's not at a full blast go.
Okay,
So that's why you see the difference from the 83 to the in the 90s.
okay, I did not see that 200-foot in the ordinance. That's
Because it
why.
wasn't changed, that's part of, that's from a different one, my understanding, because from
It
the,
was the one that I asked the clerk to send me, whatever she sent me in an email.
because we had 2 versions of this, one that was put in front of the committee before, and too much time had elapsed, and that one was, died in committee. And
Okay,
then, so this is the current one that's standing in the now.
I have something else to add, if you don't mind.
Yes. please, Stephanie.
Okay, this is really important too, because I'm nervous. I haven't been in these council chambers in 10 years. So my public speaking is a little, shaky. But one of the things that is in the ordinance is all-purpose vehicles. I can't find a definition for all-purpose vehicles, but what I would like to see added are utility vehicles. The Ohio Revised Code 4501.01 BB has a definition for a utility vehicle, which is utilized. I'll let you look at the definition. I don't think you want me to sit here and read it.
Well, we're actually amending it from all purpose to recreational.
Well, no, recreational is different than a utility vehicle. A utility vehicle is used by homeowners to maintain their lawns, taking their grass, putting it in, and then going, dumping it in their backlands. I don't think there should be any minimum acreage for those, because I know seniors that have maybe half an acre and they come in very, very handy. What my complaint would be is using those as a recreational vehicle and then coming within the 200.
You just like that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody on the committee have any comments?
So to the, how it came about was, the initial complaint was the 200 feet and the sound issue. So when I got a hold of the American Motorcycle Association, this is what's considered the national standard and what they have recommended, what they use as their standard nationally for their how they judge and rate sound. And changing it from the noise to sound was the first step in doing that, because you have to make it a quantifiable measurement. You say noise, and just talking about how loud I'm talking might be an annoyance to Councilman Jacobs, but not to you. That's it.
Any comments or questions from the administration? All right, anyone else in the audience?
My name is Ernie Festival. I happen to be a neighbor of Paula's here. I think she's probably referring to my utility vehicle.
Can you state your name for the, or your address for the record?
Pardon me?
Name and address for the record.
6743 Stony Ridge Road. Ridgeville. We had some problems last year, and I addressed those problems for Paula as far as the 200-foot borderline. And I built a path on the other side of my barn, I'm probably 250 feet away for my grandkids to travel past, which they have. They've not been any closer than that. I have a utility vehicle. I have some physical ailments that will prevent me from walking my property. And if you take and put the utility vehicles into this category with a recreational vehicle, that is wrong. You've got chainsaws, you've got wood chippers, you've got lawnmowers that are louder than the machine that I drive. Okay? And I don't see that you can put those in that same category. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I've got two neighbors north of me. There's probably a combination of about 9 acres between the three of us. And we don't have a problem with each other riding on the properties. And I am very respectful when I do go by Paula's house. I don't make any more noise than I have to run the machine. So I don't want to be forbidden to do something on my own property that I've been doing. And like I say, I've got some issues where I can't really walk back to my property and I want to go back get firewood. I want to do what I want to do. So I guess that's all I got to say.
I agree. Thank you. So I think they
Thank
should be permitted on even, like I said, a half an acre.
We have to keep this meeting orderly, so we ask that if you want to speak, you have to get your time.
Sure.
Yes.
I'd like to just point out, this is for recreational use. When you're riding your vehicle to inspect your property and get firewood and that type of thing, this does not apply to that type of usage. This is only for
I'm sorry, can I ask
recreation.
you to speak up because I got a hearing problem.
This ordinance is for recreational use. What you described as far as riding your property to inspect, get firewood and that type of thing, this does not affect. You'd still be able to do that type of activity without coming under the auspices of this particular ordinance.
Okay, that's the way I understood it, but what I just heard Paula say, she wants to put my machine in that same category. Is that not what you
No,
said?
no, no.
No, we cannot do the back and forth discussion. We have to keep this meeting orderly. Does anybody else in the audience have anything further to say?
Blaze Miller, 5305 Case Road. I have a four-wheeler. I have a side-by-side. The side-by-side is considered a UTV, a utility vehicle / recreational vehicle. It's capable of 75 miles an hour, 100 horsepower. So I can do whether I work with it or I ride with it. This is turning into a he said, she said thing about what you're doing on your property, recreational, going to do this, going to do that. We should be allowed to do with whatever we want on our property. I have 13.5 acres. I should be able to come and go as I please. I don't ride at night, except for coming home at night from plowing the city streets at 11 o'clock and to plow my driveway possibly, whether that's with my 65 horsepower tractor, which is considerably louder than my four-wheeler. So I'm just getting confused. Now we're bringing up the 200 foot range. Is that still from the back of a dwelling? Or is that going to be thrown in the mix again where they were trying to do it from fences, structures, swing sets, whatnot? I mean, most houses set back where they sit, and I gotta believe most houses are still 100, 150 foot from their property line, other than development houses. So I'm not understanding why we're throwing the 200 foot thing in again, or bringing up discussions about it, because that was brought up a couple of years ago with an incident over on, I believe it was Gatestone and Bagley Road with the dirt bikes and the gentleman on Gatestone. To me, that's a neighborly dispute. It should have been handled between those neighbors and the police department or whatnot. If those people continue to do what they're doing, tormenting that gentleman, they should be dealt with. This is just turning into a dictatorship that, like I said, I have 13.5 acres. Someone wants to start paying my tax bill for what I pay into the city taxes, then tell me what I'm gonna do. But I don't agree with a lot of stuff that's being changed. Not to mention the ordinances and whatnot. You can come and mow grass at 7:30 usually, and you listen to mowers and weed whackers, leaf blowers, and everything else, and that's perfectly okay. So God forbid you have visitors or, kids, nephews, what have you, and they want to ride, they should be able to ride within reason. We don't go buzzing through our property. Now, if we do it on the far end of our back property where it's thousands of feet from Meadow Lakes and Avalon, the way my property is situated. So I just give it consideration. I just don't understand why the 200 foot's coming back into play again. And I don't know why neighbors can't get along.
Do you want to, anybody commentary to that?
time, Jeremy? Sure. The whole reason for something like this is not for operators such as yourself, where you compromise with your neighbors.
Well, I get that, but then he said, she said, that
Wait,
she's
you
what
gotta
you're
keep
doing.
reading.
Excuse me. And you've done, from what I've been able to hear, you've done a good job of coordinating or compromising with your neighbors. This is really aimed at those operators who really don't give a care about their neighbors. And at the present time, the police do not have any ordinances to be able to stop that type of activity. And I have to admit, I get, being councilman, I get calls all the time about neighbor disputes. And it's usually because two neighbors just will not work with each other. And unfortunately, this is the reason, this is the whole reason for something like this. Personally, I don't like more laws. But unfortunately, neighbors being unneighborly for situations such as this, so we can keep the neighborhoods quiet and respect. And sometimes you have to legislate respect. I wish it wasn't so, but sometimes you do.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak at this time? Please state your name and address for the record.
At Gable, 6725. I just wanted clarification that we've moved from 5 acres to 3 acres proposed. Okay, that was my concern. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Lobby session will be closed at this time. So, I feel like the 200 feet would be adjoining a residential dwelling, not fences or a shed or, swing set. But I'm not sure of the interpretation of it. Mr. Safety Service Director, can you explain maybe that piece of it? It just says 200 feet of an adjoining residential dwelling.
So that, can I say something?
Well, it's gonna be in the eyes of the person that's developing the 200 feet, and there's gonna be the issue. I mean, there's so many things going on in the backyard, where do you get the 200 feet, and where do you start? That's the way I look at it. I mean, Jim, do you have?
The only thing that is staying the same is that has not changed. What's being proposed tonight is strictly the sound part of
I think that has changed though. If you look at the old one, the original one versus the one that we're looking at tonight, that 200 feet is no longer there.
Correct.
It's been removed.
Is that still in it? When I sat down with law director,
Can you go to the microphone so they have it for the minutes?
When I sat down with the law director before our last council meeting, the only changes that were going to be made were the ones that the committee recommended and the one that were proposed tonight with the changes.
No, that's the old one.
Because, like I said, there's been two versions of this, one that died in committee, which might be what was being referred to, because at that point there was space. And in the original one that was proposed back in August, there was a change in distance. Then that died in committee. And when I sat with the law director, these were the changes that were suggested by the committee and the ones that we wanted to make as the new piece of legislation that is separate from the original one that was given in August.
I'm not sure. You guys know what you're looking at? Because you look at this,
At the top of section
T94.
2. Yeah, it says additional regulations.
So, I'm just, right now where it says, there's so up top, the first whereas is 476.02. Okay, and then so you got A4 at the top, And then it's suggesting that it's going to change to, at the bottom of that same page, is 4760284. Okay? Then moving on to 47612 is on the first page, the second whereas section. It has an A and B. On the back page, or the second section, it's proposed that A and B are changing, and 200 feet is not in the new version.
Okay.
And it changes B from the 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. to the 6 p.m., 10 a.m. following day. So I'm not sure what is being said here is reflected in what we're talking about with this document in front of us. At least it doesn't look like it to me.
This,
Then there's the separate T106 that's over here.
so T94 died in committee, so this is actually, this one does not have a
This one's not
temporary
numbered,
ordinance
it's-
number yet.
I'm just saying, we're gonna use this as the example that we're gonna move forward with. It's different than what's being discussed. The 200 feet has disappeared under this version.
Yeah, that's what we thought.
The only reason why the 200 feet was brought up, because I forget your name,
Qualico.
had mentioned it,
Right.
Yeah.
and I believe that was the incorrect ordinance, the incorrect piece of legislation that was sent out, that was the one that died in committee.
Mr. Anderson?
A dwelling should be defined as where you live or your house. That's what a dwelling is, but
I believe if you want to additionally define that, you could use occupied dwelling.
well, you could occupy a playhouse. I mean, I'm just telling you, 10 or 15 years of 25, 30 years worth of sitting up here supporting mayor or being mayor, how's that? There's where it falls apart, because you're gonna have people defining a dwelling as that is our dwelling, that's where our kids spend their summer, that's where they sleep at night. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, if you have a neighborhood dispute between neighbors, it's how you define it yourself, and you might not define it the same way it should be defined commonly. But you might find a definition someplace else that, okay, we are inhabiting that playhouse and we are out there and that's where the kids stay. Or I sleep,
So would you
or
recommend
the
that,
cats sleep, it's their dwelling.
would you recommend 200 feet from the property line?
No. That's unheard of. That's wrong.
Residential
Well,
dwellings,
it's in
I
the
mean,
current ordinance.
Yeah.
As well.
or main residential dwelling.
The technical definition of dwelling is a house, apartment, or other place of residence.
Presumably a residence with bedrooms.
So that's not camping out in your tent or your tree house.
Right.
It shouldn't be.
If you live in a tent.
Okay.
Well, it shouldn't, it shouldn't be.
Is the committee okay with me reopening
You're
the
gonna
lobby
test our
session?
tents, huh?
Well, actually, according to the dictionary, tents, trailers, and igloos are all dwellings. I'm just saying.
Wasn't the case.
I'm gonna open up the lobby session again. Go ahead, please.
I guess we'll agree to disagree until it's figured out about the dwelling, but I have another question. The 3 acres. What if you have, like these gentlemen over here live all in a row? They have 9 acres, but by the auditor or what have you, however their layout is, their plot plan, one gentleman's got 2.9 something and change. Does that round up to the 3?
No,
Or
this
you
is
go-
excluding combined properties,
that.
different property.
That's why I'm asking that this be addressed and looked at, because don't we allow combined acreage for hunting?
Correct, but this isn't for bow hunting. This is for,
I understand that, but everything should be across the board the same way. If you're gonna allow people to combine 5 houses in a row with hunting that have 1 acre woods or what have you, all of a sudden they can hunt on that minimal land because they're all combined together. Why can't people that are all in together combine their lots for riding for their grandkids, nephews, nieces, what have you? I mean, right now, it's kind of, it's sticking it to the elderly that have stuff provided for their grandkids, nieces and nephews. You know, again, it's all because some neighbors just can't see eye to eye. But I think it should be addressed that if there's neighbors, maybe they have to sign something, I don't know, but if combining stuff, I mean, they're on record as saying they have close to 9 acres or over 9 acres. To me, they should be able to ride wherever they want in their backwoods or what have you.
anyone else that would like to speak? Mr. Kennedy?
Yes, yes, that is the question about additional acres. We are property owners adjacent to each other. We have given permission to one another to be allowed to ride on the other person's property. So I didn't assume that it was going to be any different than the hunting where it could be combined. So that would be something that I think we should consider, making it adjacent so that, and this does involve with a neighbor, that we gave permission so that they could be farther away from the neighbor, which is in the best of all worlds even better, so that they can be farther away from the properties of question. But I do believe that there should be combined anyway. I mean, I'm glad to see that it went from 5 to 3, but for those that may not have 3, but have a neighbor that's got 15 or 20 acres, why would they be allowed to ride on that person's property? Even to get to the property, they wouldn't be technically allowed to operate to even get over to a piece of property. So,
Well, I believe that given permission for somebody to ride on your property, that wouldn't, I mean, I don't believe an officer can cite you for going to your next door neighbors to ride on their property.
but you have to get to the next one. Yes. What if I have to go past the 200 foot from neighbor's dwelling to get to the piece of property to ride? I personally don't, but I could see that being a potential issue. So.
I'd like to reiterate that what Chief Freeman here says mainly complaint-driven piece of legislation. And also what Councilman Aben says is correct. Sometimes I having to add tons of legislation on people as well. That's not the way I'd like to govern, but when it comes to disputes and the police officers need a way to be able to assess how to figure out a dispute where there's more than just 1 or 2. When he told me there was 1,500 calls they got in the last few months, and a lot of those were noise complaints. He couldn't give me an exact number because that would involve him going through every single complaint. But he told me majority of them, I shouldn't say majority of them, a lot of them were, the police officers have to have a way, have to have a mechanism, have to have a way to settle these disputes. But because we're discussing the word of dwelling, okay, they go out there, they discuss the word of noise. What's a nuisance to the ATV rider was not a nuisance to the ATV rider, was a nuisance to the neighbor. Now this defines it as sound, it gives it a decibel level, it gives the police officers a way to address it. And again, it's a complaint-driven piece of legislation where you all 3 are neighbors and friends with each other. You're not gonna call on each other. And that's pretty much the understanding and sense I got when Chief Freeman here when he was talking about the legislation as well.
Thank you. Red Bull.
I don't, I know right now the ordinances doesn't talk about the combining of properties, but that's really not a bad idea. As long as the users of these recreational vehicles are staying 200 feet away from a residence. As far as they cited with the hunting ordinance, how you can combine properties to make the 5 acres. The people combining the properties, anybody coming onto that property needs permission from in writing to be able to hunt on those properties. But there is a huge difference between those two ordinances. Hunting, you are abating a nuisance. You are eliminating a nuisance to many neighbors. Recreational vehicles create a nuisance and can create a nuisance to many neighbors. When I know Mr. Fusco was talking about coming towards my property, he was coming past my property at less than 100 feet. And my house sits way back from theirs. So it's all day racetrack, you know, and when I had company over, we couldn't hear our conversations over the noise of these recreational vehicles because they were within 200 feet of where we were sitting or my back deck. I have an older structure home. The walls are only about 4 inches thick. I don't have central air. So these noises permeate throughout my house. I have an open concept house. So any type of loud noises such as that is going to affect me. It's turn the TV up, turn the radio up, because it overpowers what's going on in my house. So I am going to ask, because the ordinance that I got did not have that 200 foot put into it. It was just clear cut, private property less than 3 acres and between dawn and dusk, which was dusk and dawn. But so again, I'm just requesting that put in, and the combination of properties to me is not a big deal. It's just a matter of me being able to maintain the enjoyment of my property. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yep.
Okay, just for the record, I want to say I'm 165 feet when I go where you said I'm within 100. We've got 100-foot property between the two of us, okay? Mr. Brown owns that property, not you.
Yes.
And I'm 165 feet. The police department measured that last year when you complained. And I addressed your complaints with a phone call. And I proposed to you, Paula, what would satisfy you? My grandkids, I want them to be able to go back there and have fun and enjoy themselves.
Please talk to them, don't talk to me.
I'm talking to everybody, okay?
This isn't a meeting
So-
to solve a neighbor dispute, though. We're discussing what's coming up.
Well, I want to be factual because this 100 feet is very inaccurate. And I accommodated that 200 foot, beyond 200 foot. I made a path on the other side of my property. I'm nowhere near the 200 feet mark. I'm way beyond it. So I'm not in violation of anything.
Thank you, sir.
This is all I got.
Are there any other comments from administration? Any comments or questions from the committee?
I have to admit, I don't want to get into neighbors disputes, but I can appreciate the 200 feet, but somehow or other, and I don't know how we can do it, define dwelling as the main dwelling, where most of the activity, excluding tents, playhouses, sheds. It should be 200 feet from the dwelling itself, and I can appreciate that. And again, I've got neighbors who have loud cars and loud motorcycles and that, but I only have to put up with it for just a couple of moments and they're gone. Recreational vehicles, you're using them on your property, and you should be allowed to use them on your property, but also considering your neighbors. Your rights stop at your property line. And obviously the noise invades the property lines. So that's where the dispute is actually coming from. It's not disputing whether you can use your vehicles on your property, but trying to control the sound traveling across and basically making life uncomfortable for your neighbors. And that's basically what we're trying to come up with, is some kind of compromise that will be a benefit to both parties.
All right. Anyone else, Jason? All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I would like to add the 200 feet as C. But also we need to ask the law department to have a better definition of dwelling. And I'm not sure what that definition would be. Possibly the person who was a lawyer for a housing development could help us out in that regard. And I would like to add that before we move on with the.
I guess I do have a question. And so previously, when we were looking at this the first time, it said 200, within 200 feet of an adjoining residential dwelling. So does adjoining mean not your own home? Is it your neighbor's home? What does it mean by adjoining residential dwelling?
I would also like to correct section B where it says between dawn and dusk. I think it needs to read between dusk and 9 a.m. based on daylight savings times. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
So efficient.
I understand what, Madam Chair, snowmobiles, they're not ridden in the day, they're ridden at night.
See better.
You see better. I agree with that. I don't never own a snowmobile, but I know that out at my facility, 57 and 82, about 10:30 at night, before we close, there might be 50 of them out there filling up with fuel. They come flying over the top out of the fields and they come in and get fuel and then they're out there. I don't know how long they're up there. They're a long ways from 200 feet from my house, I can tell you that.
Snowmobiles have been on there.
Yeah, the snowmobiles are on that.
Since the 70s.
Yes,
Snowmobiles have been listed as that since the original ordinances back in.
Yes, because that ordinance is also flawed, because it said you could ride across a road rather than alongside the road, and I got pulled over once by Officer Jones on my way to work one year. And he said,
But I don't believe snowmobiles today are an issue.
It's a complaint driven,
They probably are not in North Ridgeville.
being a complaint driven with those 50.
it doesn't snow anymore.
No, it's called a complaint lot.
Yeah, but
That's not
true.
No, I know, they're out, they run Center Ridge.
Last year.
Huh?
Okay, so do we have an answer on the,
December 1st, Christmas and President's Day.
we have to keep this meeting in order.
Oh,
Mr. Miller, we have to keep the meeting in order.
I was addressing the mayor.
Your boss. So, Mayor Corcoran, do we have, any way to define the definition of a dwelling?
I mean, you can define anything you want by adding additional language in there. I guess the question is, it sounds like you want some additional things in these.
Need to tighten up the word dwelling because as you pointed out, folks can,
It's a tent.
Exactly,
Yeah.
they could. So your choice is to pass a motion to allow this to go to council. But it sounds like you have more things that you want to have changed in it. So the other option would be to have it go, have a conversation with the law director and get some of those changes made before you pass it along to council.
Would there have to be another safety committee meeting at that point?
Yeah, because it won't
Pass
go to council until they kick it out of committee.
it. You can't pass it to committee based on the amendment? Or pass it to council based on the amendment?
You don't have the amendment, so you'd have to amend it
And that
while
means-
it's in council, on council, through the process.
And I have to admit, what I'm trying to do is tighten up dwelling. And I'm not sure what words would tighten it up that a lawyer won't pick apart.
Understood.
And we can do
There
that
are
on
no
on
words you
council
can put
floor,
in there
correct?
that a lawyer won't.
Pardon me?
There are no words that you can add that a lawyer won't pick apart.
I'm dealing with that personally right now.
Personal experience.
So if we amend it to add a section C to a 200-foot dwelling, along with section B between dusk and 9 AM based on daylight savings, we can actually, as it goes to the three readings on council floor, amend the 200-foot dwelling definition.
Uses where you can use. So.
What if it's right?
That would eliminate tents.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if you're gonna, the 200 feet, if you're in the woods, and maybe you guys can help me. If the people are gonna walk the path every day, there's gonna be a path, is that correct? If through the grass, there's gonna be a path. So if you're 200 feet away and it's evidential that you're within that 200 feet with a bike path or a motorcycle path or whatever kind of path you want, other than a walking path. If there's evidence of that, I'm thinking of how are our police officers even gonna begin to enforce this in a reality standpoint? How does that happen?
Well, then I would think too that they would have to witness it. I mean,
Well, but if there's a path, if there's you know that a motorcycle or something is going within closer than 200 feet and they've rolled it in regardless. I would say that there's evidence of that. This gentleman here said that he actually moved to the other side. So his path now is grown in, I'm assuming, or will be grown in. And he's driving on the other side, so he can be 200 feet away from Paula Pope's house in order to do that. So in there, if there's evidence of a path that has been used, maybe that could help our officers try to maintain this. I don't know.
When I talked to the American Motorcycle Association, the word path is a very loosely described term. It's anything that is a drivable area. Because I asked him, I said, can you explain to me, so I can put into this ordinance an exact definition of what a riding path would be? He said that there's no
way.
It's a very difficult term to identify and it's as hard as dwelling is. That's the American Motorcycle Association telling me that.
y'all just get along.
Right, exactly, yeah, because the sound limit section. So I'm not sure exactly how you enforce that one. Because you gotta figure out the decibel level. You gotta figure out the RPM. And you gotta be there for over a 5-minute period of time. So, one of our challenges with our police officers enforcing fireworks ordinances, for example, is they have to catch the person in the act. So similar to this, so the guy's gotta pull up, start his watch,
Watch for
wait
5
until
minutes.
5 minutes goes by before, so, I don't know if Freeman addressed that at all, but
They have a device, him and Babbitt, Mr. Babbitt purchased a device several years ago that they actually had to use. Paul Blanchett, the one that came out a couple of times to one house and actually has used it, but there was nothing defined what that means. They know how to use it, but it was never defined. So what does that mean?
okay.
That's the national standard, that's how it's rated.
Okay. Again, this is driven, so I'm
Right.
assuming
What
that
happens
the
if you're
police
seven-
officers are gonna be rolling up on these folks actually using the equipment.
How do you know 50% RPM versus 75% RPM?
It's like you're already on highway, you see the numbers, and you hit gas, you can see what the number is.
The meter measures that?
No, you have to look at your vibrant vehicle, so when you think of in your car, you see your miles per hour, and you see your RPMs. So if it's 10, it's the highest number, 5 would be the
I believe most of those machines have a meter.
Oh, so you're actually going after the piece of equipment, not the person.
It's the actual, yes. That's where the sounds come from.
Thanks for coming tonight, Mayor.
Happy to be here.
It's again, that's what the chief says, complaint driven. These gentlemen aren't gonna call on each other. But there's, I don't like to have people riding around in my neighborhood just now as they looking.
Yeah.
Zipping in between houses.
Wouldn't that fall in line to similar, like if you have one of those pipes on your car and you zoom by an officer, it's actually a pipe on the car, but they ticket the driver for the noise ordinance.
Yeah, but what do you do? Like, you take the piece of equipment away from them so they can't use it anymore? If it violates the ordinance? I'm just wondering, like, I'm thinking next steps, sorry, 2 or 3 steps ahead.
It's much like muffler laws, where you get a ticket for a loud muffler, you have so many days to get it fixed. And I would assume that's what this is as well. And I know some of these operators, I'm not saying you gentlemen do, but a lot of these operators take the mufflers off because they get more horsepower, they like the noise.
I know that there's also, taking it to the next step, there's also training that's provided by the people that I talk with down at Columbus for officers. I know all our budget is, so I just don't, that would be a possibility to train the officers. So there's training available for it.
Okay, so there's currently an amendment standing on the floor. Do we want to go ahead with that, or do we want to discuss this further?
Does the, Madam Chair, does the equipment then require you, like the OBI, the device, to be trained and certified to run that device?
It's not, just have to know how to, there's no certification for it, it's just training how to do it. But I remember seeing that, I'll let a couple of our police officers, I know Chief Freeman said a couple of them know how to do it at this point. I know it's been taken out to different, at least one house and has been used.
Does the committee think we need to discuss this further, or would we like to go ahead with the?
I would recommend. Madam Chair, I would like to amend and put in under C, on any private property within 200 feet of an adjoining permitted occupied residential.
Then I would like to amend section B that states between dusk and, or between dusk, dawn and dusk, to read between dusk and 9 AM based on daylight savings time. Second verse. About the voice control, sound control. You're gonna recommend that to city council, or is there any amendments in that?
Are you gonna combine the parcels?
It's written.
It's written there, it's not.
You got her all saying that it was okay. It was okay.
It says, upon any private property less than 3 acres and excluding combined parcels with different property owners.
But you can get rid of it, exclude.
Let's deal with the first one.
First one doesn't exist. It's not. The first one doesn't exist because it died in committee. So it has to be reintroduced. So
I would move to reintroduce this ordinance.
you can't do that in this committee.
You would have to basically,
It has to be, you have an amendment that you wanted to make to that first one.
Yeah.
You would make those changes before it gets introduced as a new T number at a future council meeting.
So then you moved to add the 200-foot permitted occupied dwelling. And I seconded it, and then I moved to change the verbiage of number B. Who seconded that? So all in favor, say yes. Yes.
I have like one of
We don't have any lobby sessions open right now. Okay, so now to ordinance, an ordinance amending chapter 634, noise control to sound control. Does anybody on the committee have any discussion with that one? Hearing none, anybody on the mayor's administration? Hearing none. I'm going to open a lobby session to discuss this ordinance, chapter 634, noise control, sound control. Does anybody in the audience have any comments or questions about that?
Would this fall under the combination?
This is something totally separate.
Well, that noise ordinance that's up there is, has the excluding properties. It says the 3 acres excluding combination. That's what I was wondering. Where does that fall in actually?
This is the one that, the first one excludes the acres. The second one does not exclude acres. It's about noise.
Second one's just changing the name to noise to sound.
Yeah, I get that, but I was still on.
But they're on the second one.
So there's two today. Nobody has any questions or comments? All right, lobby session is now closed. I will entertain a motion. Chapter 634, noise to sound control.
yes, I'll move. Councilman Plesky. This.
I don't know that you can.
I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah, you can only move the legislation forward or keep it here. That's, you can't force Mr. Molesky to do anything. You do not have that kind of power.
But, yes, gotta move it forward.
I'll second that. All right, all in favor, say yes.
Yes.
God.
All right, with no further business before this, what,
Sorry.
Nothing.
for this committee, the meeting is now adjourned.
So where does that fall?
I don't know.
Should be able to combine it.